The Maya civilization flourished in the regions of what is present-day Yucatan, Chiapas, Belize, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. Mayas were responsible for their achievements in astronomy, science, and engineering. Their civilization lasted for more than 2,000 years, but the height of its power was from 300 AD to 900 AD, known as the Classic Period. They were imperial forces that had fierce warriors and conquered vast amounts of territories. Prisoners of war captured from their conquest were used as a labor source or as human sacrifices. Human sacrifices served cultural purposes. Blood rituals were performed in offering to their gods, as life was understood to be sacred and belonging to their gods. The Maya were extraordinary engineers that would create aqueducts that some historians and archaeologists found rival the aqueduct systems of ancient Rome. In the kingdom of Palenque, Mayan engineers focused on practical needs and met the challenges of the tropical and humid region. For example, in Palenque there are steep hills and other challenges, but created subterranean aqueducts connected to the four rivers in the kingdom that would save a substantial amount of time in cultivating and maintaining their agricultural practices. The Maya were extremely intelligent, being able to grow corn, beans, squash in some of the most inhospitable places. They created roads called Zakbob, meaning linear roads, which were over 60 miles long. These roads connected Mayan kingdom to Mayan kingdom for trade or economic purposes. The roads served multiple symbolic purposes and connected to city centers like Chichen Itza, Palenque, Tikal, and Copan. Astronomy would be studied by the Maya, and these studies were conducted in their own observatory called Caracon. To observe the moon, planets, Milky Way, the sun, and other astronomical occurrences. For specific reasons, El Caracon was the place where they studied the planet Venus, which was prevalent to the Maya. And studying the cosmos, they were able to predict solar eclipses and lunar eclipses. They would record these phenomenons with their complex writing system of hieroglyphics. Additional temples were built in recognition of other significant planets. It is important to know when Mayans built these temples and pyramids, they were not built in random locations. Each placement served a purpose. The Mayan created two calendars, a ritual calendar and a solar calendar. There was a meaning to every day, and the calendar even had a Maya horoscope. They understood the solar year was 365 days. Also, the calendar would dictate when to harvest, when to go to war, and when it was time for peace. In Chichen Itza, the temple of Kukulkan has 4 stairwells that symbolize for each season and also symbolize the equinox of spring and fall that would show the body of Kukulkan. This temple was an honor for the sun. The symbol of the cross for the Maya was ubiquitous to their civilization. The cross for the Maya was called Yasche, the tree of life that connected the underworld, earth, and the cosmos. The images of a cross are in Palenque, where the tomb of Emperor Pacal the Great was at, or Chica in Guatemala, and Hanabuku in Yucatan. The Mayans understood everything in a cyclical view. They believed the cosmos, all living beings, and the earth were all connected to each other. Their civilization was not above nature, but held the same value as all living beings within their environment. Therefore, they would study the ecology the changes of seasons, the rotation of the earth, and even life as all connected in a cyclical worldview. Mayan belief to conserve harmony and the environment, that nature cannot be controlled and not to take more than one needs. The Mayans believed in order to embrace life, one must embrace death. Fear and respect were not separate concepts, but meant the same thing. In 900 AD, the Mayan civilization collapsed, and theories of their breakdown vary from external or internal warfare, or overpopulation, but the most popular theory is that drought and famine factored to their demise. Contrary to popular belief, the collapse of the Maya civilization did not mean that the Maya disappeared. The Maya people were persistent and scattered along the vast rainforest of Belize, Chiapas, Guatemala, Honduras, and Yucatan, and were able to build their own communities. In 1517, conquistadores led by Francisco Hernández Córdoba arrived to Yucatan and led a failed escapade where he and his army were defeated by the Mayans. Córdoba and many conquistadores were killed in their efforts. The conquistadores could not handle the vast rainforest and saw no reason to stay and conquer the Maya. Yucatan lacked gold. The dense jungle and terrain would prove difficult for horses and ill-suited for battle formations. Spanish war tactics demonstrated that it was difficult to subjugate the Maya. The Maya put up a sustained fight, and Maya warriors would kill thousands of conquistadores. More importantly, Mayan resilience and their resistance was fierce and refused to stay conquered. By 1527, Spanish forces would focus on Yucatan, which became a long and bloody warfare. It took 20 years. By 1547, the Maya was decimated, no longer able to combat European disease and superior weapons. The conquistadores conquered the northwest of Yucatan, which had the most Mayan population and was the most hospitable for the colonizers. However, not all of Yucatan was conquered. There were communities of Tipu and Petén that was controlled by the Mayans. The next phase of the conquest was to destroy Mayan culture and to convert them to Catholicism. Missionaries would emerge in Yucatan, and Franciscan friars would use Mayan leaders to help them convert their people. Ishpimenta were Mayan priests who posed as Catholic assistants to convert other Mayans, but were actual forces that mocked the church and anti-Spanish resentment. They would hide Maya idols, books, and other Maya artifacts. Even the Maya in the northwest of Yucatan were still worshipping their gods and maintained their culture in secret. Friar Diego de Landa was sent by Spain to go to Yucatan with the objective to convert the Maya to Christianity. De Landa was a radical idealist who understood the need to save souls and to convert the Maya. The Maya would face further persecution because of his arrival. They did not allow themselves to be converted easily and resisted. Until July 1562, De Landa initiated his plan called Auto de Fe that will burn idols, artifacts, and the Maya Codex, because De Landa believed they were the works of the devil. This was thousands of years of accumulated knowledge of history through astronomy, religion, agricultural practices, engineering, and more importantly, their culture. Historians of today would argue De Landa burned thousands of books as well as tortured or killed thousands of Mayans in the process. The Mayans in the northwest were converted to Catholicism, but were able to manipulate the religion based on their own religious understanding. The Maya understood the Catholic religious practices, such as human sacrifice, as God sacrificed his only son Jesus. The symbol of the crucifixion, showing Jesus bloodied, showed the Maya how the blood ritual was understood in Catholicism, and the use of smoked incest was already used since the classic period of the Maya, and made sense to them since the Catholic Church would also use this in their practices. Still, the Maya used other forms of resistance and endured harsh conditions by the Catholic Church. Some Maya were able to escape these religious persecutions and hard labors. Locations such as Tipu, which was a safe haven for runaway Mayans to maintain their cultural identity. Other communities such as Petén, Mani, Chocua, La Pimienta was free from colonial control. Thousands of runaway Mayas would go to seek refuge and continue their cultural practices. From 1544 to 1706, the community of Tipu would courageously fight off the Spanish and remain autonomous. It took over a century and a half for the Spanish to subdue this community. They were not conquered by the Spanish until 1707. There were other Mayan rebellions such as Pimienta, the massacre in Sacalum in 1624, and the revolt in Tizala in 1712, were all examples of Mayan resistance during the colonial period. During the colonial period, the church played an important role as an entrepreneurial force and monopolized important lands from the Maya. The Franciscans became rural bankers to acquire a large scale of properties. They were corrupt and vicious. They pursued taxes, collection of tribute, as well as other fees to subdue the Maya. The Catholic Church had a huge role in labor and land systems. The Maya lower class was heavily relied on labor force that endured miserable conditions and debt. In 1808, Emperor Napoleon invaded Spain, and the overthrow of the Spanish monarchy created political instability, and due to this instability, the Spanish created the Constitution of 1812, which established the principles of universal male suffrage, national sovereignty, and supported land reform and free enterprise. These principles would inspire the Mayans to demand equality and lighter taxes. Due to corruption, the Mayans would briefly see equality and lesser taxes. The elites in Yucatan would revert back to their old ways, and the Mayans would be oppressed and taxed. During the 1820s, the sugar industry would be established in Yucatan, and due to legislation, over millions of acres would be taken away from Mayan estates. The Mayan peasants would be bound to these haciendas and were overworked to the point of exhaustion. In Yucatan, hostilities broke out on the state's southeastern frontier of commercial sugar expansion. Here the Maya peasantry bitterly resented increased taxation. The loss of the milpa, maize lands, debt peonage, and physical abuse on the sugar plantations enhanced their resentment for the Yucatan elites. During the independence of Mexico, 1821, the church caused widespread resentment among the Maya. The priests lost their power after the independence, but they remained owners of large properties and used their position to repress indigenous communities. Political leaders would continue to give the Mayans false guarantees that taxes would be reduced and land ownership would be returned to the Mayans. As these vows never came into fruition, this created great animosity with the Maya. By 1841, due to political turmoil between the Mexican government and the Yucatan government, the Yucatecos would break away from Mexico in 1841. The independence of Yucatan would need to acquire new soldiers for their military. The Mayans were recruited to the Yucatan military, gaining access to specialized training and guns which the Maya never had access to. The Yucatan government pledged to the Mayans lower taxes to gain political access and economic freedom and provide open citizenship for the Mayans to participate and to be treated like equals among the Yucateco elite. Once again, these unfulfilled agreements would immobilize the Maya to fight for liberation. The Maya would utilize a famous adage, to defeat your enemy, you must become your enemy. These frustrations created a groundswell of resistance. In 1847, the Maya launched a campaign against their colonizers to liberate themselves from foreign domination. By the 1840s, a rebellion would be formed by the Mayans called the Cruzob. They armed themselves to overthrow their oppressors. The Casta War was from 1847 to 1901 and will last over 50 years. The Cruzob rebellion pillaged areas and were able to control vast amounts of territory in Yucatan. In doing so, the Cruzob was able to destroy sugar plantations and bring back the milpa, protected Mayan communities, and fought for social justice. The Cruzob were able to defeat the Yucatan military. But the Yucatan government will request help from Mexico, who would then send their federal troops in 1901. During this time, the Cruzob began waning down, and with the alliance of Yucatan and Mexican military forces, the Cruzob would lose the Casta War. Although this rebellion faltered in 1901, it was considered the most successful indigenous rebellion in Latin American history. Although the Cruzob were defeated, some Mayan villages were able to conserve their autonomy. According to historian Nancy Ferris, the area of Lacadon was never controlled or conquered by Spain, and today is still isolated and culturally conservative to the Mayans. The Mayan language was maintained in several communities, and the Mayan Yucatec language are being taught in schools and universities in Yucatan. Furthermore, the writing system of Mayan hieroglyphics is being taught to Mayan children and adults. In Tijosco, a museum opened in 1993 called La Guerra de Castas, operated by a Mayan community. One of the owners, Patrice Poul, stated that the museum is a representation of our Mayan heroes that sacrificed their lives so we can conserve our customs and traditions. Mayan political and human rights activist Rigoberta Menchú Tum was able to win the Nobel Peace Prize for her bravery in using her voice to speak out against the injustices done by Guatemalans to the Mayans and fight for all other indigenous groups. It's been over 500 years since the Spanish arrived, but the Maya still remain today. Their legacy is of resistance and resilience.